B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Taanit Daf Yud. We're going to start the very top line. Says the Gemara, Tonu Rabbanon, Eretz Yisrael nivreis tchila. The first land Hashem created was Eretz Yisrael. V'chol ha'olam kulei nivro l'b'soif, and only after that Hashem created the rest of the world. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, in Mishli, Adle oso Eretz v'chutzois v'roish afreis tevil. It first mentions that Hashem created Eretz, which is referring to Eretz Yisrael, and only afterwards v'chutzois it mentions, so to speak, the outskirts of Eretz Yisrael, which is the rest of the world. Eretz Yisrael, another detail in the Brisa is Eretz Yisrael, Mashka Oisa Kodesh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmoi, that Hashem waters Eretz Yisrael himself, so to speak. However, the rain that comes to the rest of the world is, so to speak, given to us via an agent. Shenemer, as it says in the Pasuk in Iyov, Hanoisein Motor, Hashem himself gives rain al Pnei Eretz, to the face of Eretz Yisrael. V'sheileach mayim, and he sends water al pnei chutzos, to those outside Eretz Yisrael. Another detail, Eretz Yisrael shoysa mei geshomim. Eretz Yisrael actually drinks from the pure and original rainwater. V'chol ha'olam kulei, and the rest of the world mitamtzis, only gets the leftovers of the rain. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, hanoisein motor al pnei Oretz, that very same pasuk in Iyov, that Hashem gives motor, the rain, to Eretz Yisrael. V'sheileach mayim, however, to the rest of the world, it's not motor, it's just water, and water is just the remnants, the leftovers of the rain. Another detail, Eretz Yisrael shoyset tchila, Eretz Yisrael gets watered the first. And the rest of the world gets the rain after Eretz Yisrael. Shenemer, as it says in the Pasuk, again the same Pasuk. First, Hanoisein motor al pnei Oretz, Hashem gives the rain to Eretz Yisrael, and only afterwards, V'sheleach mayim al pnei chutzos, that the rest of the world, the chutzos, those outside Eretz Yisrael, get watered. Mashal la'odam, this is a parable to somebody, Shemegabel es agvino, he's kneading the cheese, and noitel es oichel, he takes the solidified cheese from the milk mixture, umaniach es apseiles, and he just leaves the more inferior watery part of the milk, he gets left over, and so too with the rain, Eretz Yisrael gets the original, the real rain, and only afterwards the leftovers is given to the rest of the nations. Continues the Gemara Omar Mar. We saw on Daf Tesamad base that the Gemara asked a question that according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that the rain comes from the oceans, so Rabbi Yeshua asked Rabbi Eliezer, how can it be? The ocean water is salty, and the rain is not salty. If it was salty, nothing would be able to grow. And Rabbi Eliezer answered that the clouds, they sweeten the water, even though they originate from the oceans, which are salty, the clouds sweeten it. So Omar Mar, Memaskin hein ba'ovin minole. How do you know, Rabbi Eliezer? What would be your source that the clouds actually sweeten the water? Answers the Gemara, the Omer Rabbi Yitzchok bar Yosef, Omer Rabbi Yechanon, Ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, and we saw this on Daf Tes. There's one pasuk that says, Yoshes choshech sisrei sivoisov sukosoi cheshchas mayim. The darkness of the water is ovei shchokim, is the thick skies, it's the thickness of the skies, the thick clouds in the sky. Uchsiv, in a different pasuk, it doesn't say cheshchas mayim, which is the darkness of the water, it says chashras mayim, which chashras means like a sieve. The sieve, like the water that comes like from a sieve of Ishchokim, is the clouds of the sky. So in one pasuk it says chesh chas, which is with a chof. In another one it says chashras with a reish. So the Gemara says shkoil kaf, take the chaf of chesh chas, v'shodi, and throw it or put it a reish next to the reish of chashras. The Kori Ben, you'll read it hachshoras. And then it would mean that hachshoras mayim, the of ishchokim, it's the clouds, which hachshora is from the term of preparing. The clouds prepare the water. What do the clouds do to the water? They sweeten the water. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yeshua bahani kroi mai dorish buhu. According to Rabbi Yeshua, who he doesn't have this issue. Rabbi Yeshua says that the waters actually came from the Mayim Elyonim. The rains don't come from the oceans. So he doesn't need these psukim to tell us that the clouds actually sweeten the water, because there's the waters of the upper waters, which is, according to Rabbi Yeshua, the origins of the rain, they were not salty. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, what does he do with this issue of having the cheshchas and the chashras? Answers the Gemara that from the first pasuk of cheshchas mayim, the darkness of the water, he learns as follows. When Rav Divi came to Bavel, Omar, he said as follows. Omri b'Marovin, Eretz Yisrael, they explained that Nohir Anoni, when the clouds are light, Zeirin Moihi, then the waters inside those clouds are minimal. Choshoch Anoni, when the clouds are dark, then Sagyun Moi, there's an abundance of water in it. So from the Cheshkas Maim of Ishchokim, he learns that from the darkness, depending on how dark or light the clouds are, one can tell how much water is in it. That's what he does with the Cheshkas. What does he do with the Chashras Maim? So that the Gemara here doesn't tell us, and Rashi here discusses that. And Rashi says that if you look in the Gemara earlier on, we see that Rabbi Yeshua learns from the Chashras that the clouds are like sieves. They receive the water from the Mayim Elyonim, and then they get sprinkled onto the land. Continues the Gemara. Kaman oz lehod Tanya, which opinion of the two opinions we saw earlier on? We saw in Daf Tesamud Beis that according to Rabbi Eliezer, the rain originates from the oceans. According to Rabbi Yeshua, it originates from the upper waters. The following brisa that says Mayim Elyonim, the upper waters, b'mamarim tluyim, they're not held and they're not suspended in any utensil or anything that can contain them. They are held by Hashem's word. Hashem says the waters should stay up here, and they stay up there. Upeirei seim, and the fruits of those waters, megashomim, is the rain. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, mashke horim me'ali Yosef, that the mountains get watered from the upper chambers, miprima secha, from the fruits of Hashem's deeds, tizba oretz, the land gets satisfied, gets watered. So you see from there that the rain is only a peirus, it's only the fruits, the offspring, so to speak, of the huge collection of water in the Mayim Elyonim. So this brisa, who is that following? Kaman Rabbi Yeshua, it's following Rabbi Yeshua, who says that indeed the rain comes from the waters in the upper waters, not from the oceans. Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that all the waters come from the ocean, what does it mean? Miprima sechotiz ba'oretz, that it's coming from the fruit, so to speak, from something that comes from a huge collection of water. According to Rabbi Eliezer, what would that mean? He says that it's the ocean is evaporating and then it becomes rain. Says the Gemara, is not referring to the, so to speak, the fruits of the water. That means something that's coming from the waters up there. No, it's talking about Hashem's deeds, the fruits of Hashem's deeds. The ocean is also the fruits of Hashem's deeds, and therefore the rain originating from the oceans are also considered prima sechot tizbah haaretz. Continues the Gemara, Omre Yeshua ben Levi, Kol ha'olam kuloi mitamtzis gan Eden hu sheisa. The whole world is drinking from the leftovers of what Gan Eden drinks. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, v'nahar yotzim Eden, a river went out of Eden, lahashko yises hagon, in order to water the garden, or misham yipared v'harei l'arba, and from there it separated into four, and then at some point the rest comes down to the world. Tana, we learned in a brisa, mitamtzis beis kur, from the leftovers, so to speak, of a huge container which can hold a kur, sheisa tarkav, which means the water that's left on the inside edges of a huge base kur is enough to be able to water a tarkav, an area of 3 kav, which is a 60th of a base kur. So which means that the leftovers are normally the size of a 60th of the original quantity. Tonu Rabbanon, we learned in a brisa, Eretz Mitzrayim havya daled meis parasal daled meis parasa. Mitzrayim was 400 parasa square by 400 parasa, which is 160,000 square parasa. Vahu, and Mitzrayim is echod mishishim bekush, is a 60th of Kush. So Kush must have been 9,600,000 square parasa. The Kush, echod mishishim ba'olam. And Kush is a 60th of the whole world, the world being 576 million square parasol. Va'olam, and our world is echod mishishim, is a 60th of the garden mentioned in the Torah, began. Vegan, the garden, echod mishishim le'eden, is a 60th of Eden. Ve'eden u echod mishishim le'gehenim. Gehenim is 60 times greater than Eden. Nimtza. So it seems from here, and it's apparent from here, that kol olam kuloi, the whole world, relative to Gehenim, is a very, very small ratio. Kukisui kedera leGehenim, in the same way as a lid of a pot is relative to the size of the pot is very small, so too the ratio of the world relative to Gehenim is a very small ratio of it. V'yesh oimrim, some say, Gehenim ein lo shiur, that Gehenim actually has no measure. V'yesh oimrim, others say, Eden ein lo shiur, even Eden has no measure. Omer Rabbi says, Ma'idich this that it says in the Pasuk, Sheichant, you dwelled al mayim rabim, on many waters, Rabas oitzoris, an abundant of storehouses, bo kitzeich amas bitzeich. That's what it says in the Pasuk. So how is Rabbi learning this? Mi goram lebovel, who caused Bovel, shiyu oitzroiseo meleois bar, that its storehouses are full of grains? Havoimer mepnei sheichenes al mayim rabim. So referring to Bovel, Bovel dwells sheichant al mayim rabim, on many waters, and that's the reason that Rabas oitzoris, that there's an abundance of storehouses of grain. Omar Rav said, Atira Bovel, Bovel is very rich, the chatzda, because they are able to reap the produce, b'lo mitra, even without rain. Because we know that Bovel is very low down, and all the rains from all the surrounding countries and places flow down to Bovel. So Omar Abaya says, Noktinon, we have a tradition that Toiv Oni v'lo yuvshoni, that Bovel is very swampy and doesn't dry out, is not dry. Continues the next Mishnah. Begimel b'mar Cheshvan, on the 3rd of Cheshvan, Sherlin es hageshomim, that's when we start asking Hashem for rain in the bracha of Baruch Aleinu. We say v'sein talu motor livracha. Rabbi Gamliel said that b'shiva boy, it's on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan that we start asking for rain. And the 7th of Cheshvan is Tesvav Yoim Achar Achag, especially with the calendars today. The 7th of Cheshvan is always 15 days, 2 weeks after Sukkot, in order that the last person, the one living furthest away, Lenahar Paros, near the river Paros, would be able to go back from being in Eretz Yisrael over Sukkot and arrive back home before the rain starts coming down. Says the Gemara, Omer Rabbi Loza, Halacha Rabbi Gamliel. We've already seen this on Daf Daled and Daf Vov. Rabbi Loza said the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that we start saying the same Talumota on the 7th of Cheshvan. Tanya Chananya Omer, Ubegoila, in the diaspora, in Chutz La'aretz, at Shishim B'tkufa. The time to start asking for the rain is the 60th day of the winter season, and this is the seasons that are not measured or not counted by the lunar months, rather the solar year. The sun year is split into 4, each season being approximately 90 days. The 60 days into the winter tkufa, that is which is sometime in November, which is when we start saying V'sein talu motor in Chutz La'aretz. Omer Rav Huna bar Chia, Omer Shmuel, halacha kechananya, the halacha is like Chananya. Asks the Gemara, Eini, v'aboy minei Shmuel, did they not ask Shmuel, Ma'emas matcharinon, when do you start saying V'sein talu motor? Omer Luhu, and Shmuel said, Mechima'ayla tzivi, from the time where they would bring the wood, lebei Tovos, to the sheds of Tovos, Rishba the bird hunter, because they knew and they understood that from that point on, the rain would start coming down, they would no longer be able to chop the wood, and therefore they would take the wood they've chopped and put it into the sheds. So you see that they would say V'sein talu motor from the point when they would bring the woods into this person's sheds, not 60 days into the season. Answers the Gemara, maybe both of them is the same date. Maybe it was 60 days into the season that they would bring the woods into the storehouses. Gemara asks a question, Yom Shishim, when it says that we start saying V'sein talu motor 60 days into the winter season, Is that the 60th day itself, Kilifnei Shishim, is it still like before the 60 and you don't yet mention V'sein Talu Motor? Or Kilachar Shishim, or is it after the 60 days and you do say V'sein Talu Motor? Says the Gemara Tashema, Rav Omar Yom Shishim Kilachar Shishim. Rav says you start saying V'sein Talu Motor on day 60. Shmuel Omar, Shmuel said no, Yom Shishim Kilifnei Shishim, the 60th day is like before, you only start saying V'sein Talu Motor on day 61. Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok said, how are you going to remember who said what? How are you going to remember that Rav said that you say V'sein Talu Motor a day earlier and Shmuel a day later? For Simonoch, the sign you can have to remember that is Eloi, Rav, who came from Eretz Yisrael. He came from highlands, from places which are high, and therefore Boyomaya, they need the water quicker, and therefore he starts saying Rav, who came from there, started asking for the rain a day earlier. Tatoi, but Shmuel, who came from Bovel, who was in the lowlands, Loi Boyemaya, they did not need the water, and therefore they would start saying V'sein Talu Motor a day later. And there's a discussion in the Mefarshim why the place where Rav is living should make a difference to what his opinion is about the people in Bovel when they should say V'sein Talu Motor, but this is a basic reading in the Gemara. Omer of Papa, Hilchas Halacha is Yom Shishim Kilachar Shishim. We actually start saying V'sein Talu Motor on the 60th day of the winter season. Continues the next Mishnah. Higio Yud Zayin b'Mar Cheshvan. If the 17th of Mar Cheshvan has arrived, and the rains have not yet fallen, Hischilu hayechidim, the individuals, we'll soon see who they are Misanim Gimel Tainiyos, they fast for 3 consecutive Tanesim, being a Monday, followed by a Thursday, followed by a Monday. And on those Tanesim, Oichlin v'shoisim mishechashecha, they would only fast during the day, not during the night. Umutorin b'melacha, they were allowed to do work, b'urchitza, they were allowed to wash themselves, bathe themselves, or b'sicha, and to anoint themselves, or b'ni'ilas sandal, to wear shoes, or b'tashmish hamita, and to have marital relations. Higia Rosh Chodesh Kislev, if you're ready a few days later already, it's not anymore the 17th of Cheshvan, it's already the Rosh Chodesh Kislev v'lo yardu gushamim, and the rain has still not come down, then Beis Din Goizrim Sholish Taniyos al HaTzibur. Now the Beis Din decree that everybody has to fast. Oichlin v'shoisim mishechashecha, you can eat and drink during the night, the fast is only during the day. Umotorin b'melacha u'berachitza b'sicha b'nilas hasandlo b'tashmish hamita, like we saw before, the conditions are the same, but it was on the Yud Zayin Cheshvan, which is when the Yechidim, the individuals, would fast, and it's from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is when the Tzibur, the public, would have to fast. Asks the Gemara, Man Yechidim, who are these individuals that would volunteer, so to speak, to fast earlier than everybody else? Omer Rav Huna Rabbanon, it's the Talmidei Chachomim. V'Omer Rav Huna, another statement Rav Huna said, Yechidim misanim shloisha taniyos, that these individuals, they would fast 3 taniyos, which is exactly what it says in the Mishnah. Just Rav Huna added, Sheni v'chamishi v'sheni, Monday, Thursday, Monday. Asks the Gemara, Maiko Mashmalon, what's Rav Huna trying to impress on us? That one has to fast Sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. Tanina, we already see in the Mishnah, it's explicit in the Mishnah later on Daf Tezvav Amud Beis, that Ein Goizrin Tainis ala Tzibur, that when the Tzibur, when the public make a fast, B'tchila, the first of the 3 fasts, should not be B'chamishi on a Thursday, Shalei Lafkia es ha'sha'arim, in order not to cause the prices to rise. Because if the shopkeepers see that on Thursday afternoon, suddenly everyone is buying twice as much as they normally do, they normally buy for Shabbos, here they're buying twice as much. And really, why are they buying it? They're buying it because it's a fast, and at the end of the fast, they're hungry, they want to have a big meal. The shopkeepers might think there's a shortage of food, there's a hunger or famine, and they're going to raise the prices. And therefore, the first of the fasts should not be on a Thursday. So you see clearly that even though the Mishnah there mentions Al HaTzibur, but the Gemara at this point is asking that it says explicitly in the Mishnah, you don't start a fast day, a series of fast days, on a Thursday. So what's Rav Huna coming to impress on us? Says the Gemara, Elo sholish tainiyos harishonos. Indeed, what Rav Huna is trying to impress on us is that what the Mishnah says regarding the fast days of the public, the same applies to the Yechidim. Rav Huna said, Yechidim misanim, even when the private individuals fast, shloisha taniyos, it should be Monday, Thursday, Monday, not starting from Thursday. Sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. Ma'odetema, I would have thought, hanimili tzibur, that when is the concern of the prices raising, which the Mishnah speaks about on Daf later on Daf Tezvov, that it's only when the public are fasting. Aval yachid loy, but maybe when individuals are fasting, maybe we don't have an issue with that. Komash malon, that is what Rav Huna is teaching us, that even when the private people, individuals, are fasting, the first of the 3 fasts is a Monday, not a Thursday. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa to this effect. When the individuals start fasting, misanin sheni v'chamishi v'sheni, they fast on a Monday, then a Thursday, then a Monday. Umafsikin b'roshi chadashim, if any of those fasts are on Rosh Chodesh. And the Mefarshim discuss how it could be a Rosh Chodesh if the first fast is following the 17th of Mar Cheshvan. How do you get to Rosh Chodesh? The Mefarshim discuss that, but either way, if one of these fasts falls on a Rosh Chodesh, ubiyomim tovim aksuvim b'Megillas Taanit, or on one of the Yomim Tovim that the Megillas Taanit dictates one's not allowed to fast on them, then those days override the fast days, and one doesn't fast on those days. So either way, you see in this brisa proof to what Rav Huna said, that when the Yechidim are misaneh, even though it's just the Yechidim, it's Sheni v'chamishi v'sheni, and they don't start on a Thursday. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon. Al yomer odom, a person shouldn't say, Talmidani, I'm just a student, I'm just a disciple, and therefore it's not appropriate for me to follow the custom of those individuals, those Talmidei Chachomim who would fast already from the Monday after the 17th of Cheshvan. A person shouldn't say that. I'm not deserving to be similar to those individuals. He shouldn't say that. Elo kol Talmidei Chachomim yechidim. Any Talmid Chacham is allowed to and is included in the individuals, and is allowed to fast already from the first fasts. Eizeu Yachid ve'eizeu Talmid. What indeed is the accurate description of who are these individuals and who are the Talmidim? So Yachid, who are the Yechidim? Kol sheroyi limenoisei parnas ala tzibur. Anyone who's worthy, who's fit to be appointed to be a leader on the public, he's called the Yachid. Talmid, who's the Talmid, is Kol shesher linoisei dva alocha b'limudoi. Anyone who can ask him any alocha in what he's learning, b'talmudoi va'omer, and he will answer va'filu b'Masechet Taanit, and even in Masechet Kala, which is not something a person learns often, then if he can answer that, then he's considered a Talmid. And the Brisa said before that a Talmid is allowed to include himself in the bracket of the Yechidim to fast on the Monday after the 17th of Cheshvan. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon. Not everybody who wants to include himself in the brackets of those individuals is allowed to. Talmid oisa, not everybody is anybody who wants to include himself in the bracket of being a Talmid that we just mentioned, that he can answer anywhere, that oisa is allowed to do that. Divi Reb Meir, because the Yechidim had certain customs and the Talmidim had certain customs, these Talmidei Chachomim, and anybody who was not fitting to belong to that group was not allowed to join the customs of that group. Divi Reb Meir, that was the opinion of Reb Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, oisa, he is allowed to, concerning fasting from the Sheni, Chamishi Sheni, after the 17th of Cheshvan, you're allowed to, even if you're not in that bracket. Will actually be remembered positively. Why? It's not like a praise, it's not like he's wearing clothes that are suitable only for the very prestigious and prominent Talmidei Chachomim. He's just afflicting himself, he's fasting. And therefore, if somebody says, I want to join in with the Talmidei Chachomim to fast on the Monday after the 17th of Cheshvan, he's allowed to. Tani Idoch, in a different brisa, it says, not everybody who wants to consider himself and to follow the customs of the individuals is allowed to. Talmid oisa, nor is a person who doesn't belong in the bracket of Talmid allowed to follow that. Divi Reb Shimon ben Elazar. We said this before in the name of Reb Meir, now it's Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Before it was Rabbi Yossi arguing with Reb Meir, here it's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel arguing with Reb Shimon ben Elazar, and he says, when is that true? Something which causes praise, when it's the clothes that he's wearing and other conducts. But when it comes to fasting, which is an affliction and a challenge, a pain, he's allowed to. He'll be remembered positively, she'ein shevach uloi, because it's not something he's doing to ask for undeserved reward and praise. Elotzar huloi, he's just with the pain of those Talmidei Chachomim for the fact that the rain has not yet fallen. Continues the Gemara, Tonu Rabbanon. Mi shahoyo misane ala tzara. If somebody was fasting for a certain trouble, v'ovra, and then the trouble passed, either ala choyle, who was fasting for a sick person to become healed, v'nisrape, and he became healed, or if that person unfortunately passed away, he should continue the fasting. He shouldn't stop fasting just because he no longer needs the salvation, because otherwise it looks as if he's making a condition with Hashem, saying, if I'll only fast if you do what I'm asking, and if not, then I'm not going to fast. It's inappropriate to make conditions with Hashem, and therefore you should continue fasting. If a person goes to a place where they are not yet fasting, for example, there's a certain challenge there, a certain trouble, which wasn't there, and therefore they're not fasting. And he goes to a place where in that place they are fasting, he's got to fast with them, with the chumrah, he's got to take the stringencies of the place he's arrived at. If a person goes from a place where they were fasting to a place that they are not fasting, he's got to finish the fasts from the place that he left. We give him the chumras of the mokim sheyotza misham. So if somebody forgot that it was a fast day and he ate and drank, then you shouldn't tell the public, I've eaten, I've drunk, I'm satisfied, I'm not feeling hungry. It'll make them jealous. And him himself, even in private, he shouldn't say, since I've broken my fast by mistake, I might as well continue eating. No. As it says in the Pasuk, it says, Vayar Yaakov kiyeh shever b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov saw that there was a famine, there was a hunger in Mitzrayim. Vayomer Yaakov lebonov, and Yaakov said to his sons, Lo motisro, why should we make ourselves noticeable and stick out that we have food and everybody else doesn't have food? Because indeed Yaakov still had food. He didn't have to go down to Mitzrayim. But if they weren't going to go down to Mitzrayim to get food, it would be showing everybody that they're not part of the fast, not part of the challenge, the trouble. And there were no fasting then. It was Esav and Ishmael would see, oh, Yaakov and his sons are not suffering from the lack of food. And that was, Yaakov did not want to do that. Omalem Yaakov lebonov, Yaakov Avinu said to his sons, Al taru atzmechem kshatem sveim. Don't show everybody that you're satisfied. Because you don't, the sons of Esav, to feel that they're lacking, they're hungry, and the sons of Yaakov are not. Lo b'fnei Esav, not before Esav, lo b'fnei Yishmael, nor before Yishmael. K'dei shlo yiskanu b'chem, that they shouldn't be jealous of you. Continues the Gemara. The Pasuk says, Vayishalach es Echov, vayelchu vayomer aleim al tirguzu badorach. He told them, don't get agitated on the way. Omer Belazar, Omelem Yosef leEchov. This was actually Yosef speaking to his brothers when he sent them back to Eretz Yisrael, to Yaakov. Al tisasku b'dvar halacha. On the way, don't be busy, deeply engrossed in halachic discussion. Shemo tirguzu aleichem haderech. Maybe you're going to lose your way. Asks the Gemara, Eini? Can that be that you're not supposed to engage in Torah learning on the way? V'omer biloi bar brachia. Shnei talmidei chachomim, the Gemara in Saita, two talmidei chachomim shemahalchim baderech, that are going on the way. Ve'ein b'neim divrei Torah, they are not discussing Torah. Ru'in nisari, if they deserve to be burnt. Shenemar, and this is in the Pasuk in Melachim. It says in the Pasuk, Vayehi heimo hoilchim holoich v'daber. They were going, it was Eliyahu Hanavi was going together with Elisha. They were going and they were speaking. V'hinei rechev eish, there was a chariot of fire, v'susei eish, and horses of fire. Vayafridu bein shneim, and they separated between the two. Vayal Eliyahu b'sa'ora hashamayim, and Eliyahu ascended in a sa'ora to the heavens. So what do you see from there? That there were chariots of fire and susei eish. There was horses of fire, and why didn't they get burnt? Because the Pasuk says they were holoich v'daber. Whilst they were walking, whilst they were going, they were speaking. Taima de'ika dibur, only because they were speaking in Torah thoughts and Torah learning. Ha leka dibur, but in the absence of Torah, ru'uya nisar, if they would have deserved to be coming burnt. So you see from there that you are supposed to learn on the way. So how could Yosef have told his brothers, don't learn on the way? Says the Gemara, Loikasha, it's not a question. Hol and Migros, if you're just reviewing some learning and doesn't need very deep delving into and thought, that you should do on the way. Hol Yuna, but if you have to analyze deeply what you're learning, you may get lost on the way, and that you should not do. Continues the Gemara. But Masechet Taanit in a brisa they learned that the words al tirgazu doesn't mean you're going to lose the way. It actually means tirgazu means you shouldn't cause yourself harm on the way. What would that mean? Al tafsiu psiad gasa, don't make very broad and long steps. That's one, because we'll soon see why. V'achnisu chama le'ir, and you should bring the sun into the city, which means that when you're going for the night and you're going to stay in the city, make sure you're there while you arrive there whilst it's still daytime. Al tafsiu psiad gasa. The reason you shouldn't take very large steps, because we learned in Masechet Brachos and in Masechet Shabbos that psio gasa, taking very broad steps, can remove from a person, can take away a 1/500th of his eyesight. And make sure that you should, when you come to a city, come there when it's still light. Could have Yudam whenever a person leaves the town, you should leave in kitoiv. What's kitoiv? Light. And therefore you should only leave a city once after it's light. The first time it says kitoiv, it says vayare likimes ha'oyer. Kitoiv, light is kitoiv. It's very good. Vayachnes v'yikones b'kitoiv, and when at the end of the day you should come into a town when it's still kitoiv, when it's still light. Because number one, if you're out when it's dark, there might be robbers and people that can hurt you. Also, if you come into a city, especially a city you don't know, a strange place, and in the dark you might fall into the holes, into the pits that you don't recognize. And also, if you come in the dark, people might accuse you of being a spy or being a thief. Make sure you reach a town in the daytime. Shneimar, as it says in the pasuk, "Haboiker oyer va'anoshim shulchu heima v'chamereim," that it was only after it became morning that they went on their ways. So you should always be traveling when it's light, and make sure that you leave after it becomes light and you arrive before it becomes dark. Continues the Gemara, Omer of Yud, Omer of Chia, Omer Rabbi Chia, Hamahalich baderech, if somebody is traveling on the way, Al yoichal yoisem mishnei ravoin, don't eat more than you would typically eat during a famine. And we'll learn more about that on Daf Yud Aleph. My Tama, what would be the reason for that? There's two reasons. Hacha tirgumu, here in Bovel they explained mishum ma'ayona, because if you're traveling and and you're walking in travel and you have too much food in your intestines, it can cause some disorder in the digestive system. That's called ma'ayona. But Marava Omri and Eretz Yisrael, they explained mishum mazaina. They were just afraid that you might run out of food, so eat just a bit at a time to make sure you have enough food for your entire journey. Mai beinayu, where would be a difference between the two explanations? It could be nayu to Yosef Ba'arba. If you're traveling on a boat, you're not walking, you're sitting. So if you're worrying about your indigestion, there's no problem with that. However, if you want to make sure that you don't run out of food, make sure not to eat too much. Inami, a difference would be the ka'ozil me'avno le'avno. If he's traveling from one merchant's place to another, and there's a constant availability to achieve and to attain more food, therefore, as far as the indigestion is concerned, it would be an issue. As far as running out of foods, it would not be an issue. Says the Gemara of Papa, called parasa v'parasa, every parasa that Rav Papa travelled, ochel chodarifti, he would eat a loaf of bread. Kosova mishum mayana, because Rav Papa was not afraid that he would run out of. He was not afraid because he would run out of food. He actually understood, like they did in Bovel, that the issue is the indigestion. And as we know from Bab Metzia Daf Pei Daled, Rav Papa had a very broad digestive system, and therefore he himself was not concerned that because he's eating so much whilst in transit, that it would disrupt his digestive system, and therefore he could afford to eat. And for every parasol, he would eat a loaf of bread.